We are undertaking an in-depth exploration today of a life that was really defined by a paradox.
Mm,
We're looking at the career and the identity of Robert Lane Saget,
mm.
a cultural figure whose public persona wasn't just contradictory.
No, it was more than that. It feels like it was strategically built on two extremes.
Exactly, two extremes that you rarely see coexist in Hollywood.
And our analysis here, it draws from a really robust stack of biographical sources.
Mhm.
That gives us the factual framework we need to move past the simple, the surface images.
Right.
So our mission is to synthesize the facts of Saget's journey, to really understand the tension that existed between that wholesome father figure and the boundary testing stand-up comedian.
And we'll conclude with a clear, factual account of the medical circumstances of his passing and the very significant philanthropic legacy he established.
A lasting legacy.
For you, the learner who's looking for quick yet thorough knowledge, understanding Saget really requires holding that central tension in sharp focus.
It does.
This isn't a man who simply diversified his career. This is a man who cultivated two separate, highly successful, and just diametrically opposed professional identities.
He really mastered the art of being the squeaky clean family patriarch on one stage, while at the very same time being one of the most profane voices in comedy clubs all across the country.
So we need to explore the foundation, right? The foundation that allowed him to manage that risk and ultimately to thrive in both of those spheres.
It's a remarkable feat of professional compartmentalization, and it suggests, a deep underlying understanding of audience expectations and marketing, really. We have to look at where that strategic mindset came from.
Let's begin at the very start then to understand the roots of this complexity. Robert Lane Saget was born on May 17, 1956.
Right, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
He was raised in a Jewish family. His father, Benjamin, he held a demanding role as a supermarket chain executive.
And his mother, Rosalind, worked as a hospital administrator.
So that background, it suggests stability, but also a very professional environment, an understanding of business, of management.
Which might have, subconsciously informed his later career structure.
What stands out immediately in the biographical record is the sheer mobility of his early years. That often forces a child to be resilient, to be adaptable.
It does. The family moved repeatedly. They went from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia, and then, crucially, to the Encino neighborhood of Los Angeles.
And they eventually moved back to the Philadelphia area right before his senior year of high school.
That's right. He graduated from Abington Senior High School there.
But that stop in Encino is particularly interesting from a cultural standpoint. It's noted in the sources that during his time there, Saget actually had the chance to meet Larry Fine.
One of the iconic members of the Three Stooges.
Exactly. And he listened to him recount stories. Now, this might seem like a small anecdote.
But it's not. It places him, even as a young person, close to the history and the inner workings of classic American comedy.
That early exposure to the mechanics of humor is such a powerful precursor to his professional life.
Absolutely. However, his initial career trajectory was, well, it was far from comedy.
Right. His earliest and more serious ambition was to become a doctor.
And that speaks volumes, I think, about the intellectual and empathetic foundations of his character. This is not the profile of a child who is just obsessed with being a performer.
No.
And the biographical sources highlight a really pivotal moment of influence. An honors English teacher. She recognized his creative potential.
And actively steered him away from medical school?
She did. She urged him to pursue acting and film instead.
So that teacher saw the potential director, the artist, rather than the physician, and in doing so effectively rerouted his entire professional future.
It's astonishing to consider how committed he must have been to the sciences for someone else to have to step in like that.
Yeah.
And push him toward the arts.
And when he made that shift, he committed completely to the academic rigor of the arts.
He attended Temple University's film school back in Philadelphia, and he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in 1978. His time there was marked by a really serious dedication to the craft of filmmaking.
And this is where that directorial side of his personality, the serious artistic component, truly emerged. It's a sharp contrast to the loud, rapid-fire stand-up persona he later became famous for.
While at Temple, he created a black and white documentary short. It was titled Through Adam's Eyes.
We really must emphasize the nature of this project. It wasn't a lighthearted comedy sketch.
No, absolutely not. It was a sensitive documentary focused on a young boy who was undergoing extensive facial reconstructive surgery. The theme is one of human vulnerability, of pain, and the difficult process of healing.
And crucially, it was immediately recognized as high-caliber work.
It was. The film received an Award of Merit in the prestigious Student Academy Awards.
That recognition, right at the start of his career, it signals that his initial artistic voice was one of profound seriousness and empathy. It sets a foundation that's so far removed from the raunchy material that would later define his stand-up.
Yet, the other identity was also being forged at the exact same time. While he was immersed in serious film study, he was taking trains down to New York City.
To perform his earliest stand-up sets at legendary clubs like the Improv and Catch a Rising Star.
Exactly.
And we have a brilliant specific detail from those early club days that really captures his original comedic style.
The guitar bit.
Yes, he had this signature bit where he would perform the Beatles song While My Guitar Gently Weeps, but he would use a water bottle to create a mechanism that made the instrument literally appear to weep.
That detail is key. It shows a type of comedy that relies so heavily on physical uniqueness, on prop work, and on a clever subversion of a serious musical moment.
It's quirky, almost a gentle surrealism.
A world away, conceptually, from the later style of raw, boundary-pushing observational humor. The weeping guitar Saget was experimenting with was refined, it was musical, and it was playful.
So we have the serious documentarian, the aspiring physician, and the quirky musical comedian all existing in this young professional at the same time.
And this intense period of transition was then underscored by a profound, near-fatal health crisis that just dramatically reset his perspective.
The sources recount that he almost died from a burst gangrenous appendix. This was at the UCLA Medical Center on the 4th of July.
The gravity of the situation is reflected in the delay in surgical intervention.
Can you elaborate on the severity of that event, particularly the timeline of the treatment?
The records suggest a pretty alarmingly protracted period of preoperative care. Surgeons reportedly applied ice to the area for 7 hours while they were assessing the situation.
7 hours?
For 7 hours before finally performing the appendectomy. By the time they removed it, the appendix was gangrenous.
Which means the tissue had begun to die and decay.
Right, due to severe infection and a lack of blood flow. For a young person, especially one at the precipice of a demanding career, this was an intensely traumatic confrontation with mortality.
And this near-death experience happening so early, it fundamentally impacted his personal philosophy. He stated later that the experience helped him move past being, and I'm quoting, cocky or overweight.
It implies a self-critical assessment and a forced shift in his outlook.
It's a crucial piece of biographical information. It suggests that the gravity he needed to successfully explore serious filmmaking and later serious philanthropy was instilled not just through his academic interests, but through a physical trauma that made him acutely aware of life's fragility.
The implication is that this experience provided a necessary ballast, an understanding of the seriousness of existence, which then allowed him the freedom to be utterly uninhibited and filthy on stage later in life.
It's the ultimate paradox. The serious artistic foundation and the hard-won perspective gained from almost dying were what enabled him to successfully cultivate those two dramatically different public personae.
He had seen the serious side of life.
Which perhaps made the absurd side of comedy feel less risky.
I think so. If we synthesize this foundation, we see an individual with enormous intellectual drive, highly refined artistic sensibilities, and a personal history of surviving a massive health crisis. This all set the stage not for a typical sitcom career, but for one defined by strategic, high-stakes duality.
That foundation leads us directly into the late 1980s, which is when Robert Saget transformed into Bob Saget, the quintessential icon of wholesome network family programming.
Yes. The image was sealed with his role as Danny Tanner in the sitcom Full House, which premiered in 1987.
And Full House became so much more than a successful show. It really helped define post-1980s television fatherhood.
Danny Tanner was the caring, widowed, sometimes overly neurotic single father. He was characterized by his devotion, his moral compass, and his obsessive need for cleanliness.
Right, always wielding a vacuum cleaner instead of a tough guy attitude.
And the success was not trivial. The show became an institution, especially with family viewers. Its metrics were impressive.
It consistently landed in the Nielsen Ratings Top 30, starting with its third season, and ran for 8 seasons until 1995. This cemented his face as the embodiment of American family values for an entire generation.
What's truly remarkable is the simultaneous professional demand he endured during this period. In 1989, just as Full House was cementing its success, he took on a second massive role.
a role that amplified that squeaky clean image even more.
Exactly. Hosting America's Funniest Home Videos, or AFV. And he held that role until 1997.
To manage that workload, starring in one of the top 30 network sitcoms while simultaneously hosting a high-visibility primetime show,
And both projects built entirely around a wholesome, family-friendly aesthetic.
it's a staggering feat of logistical and managerial control in the early 1990s television landscape.
It meant that on Sunday night, viewers saw Danny Tanner on Full House. And often earlier that same night, they saw Bob Saget introducing clips of people falling down on AFE.
His ubiquity in the most family-safe slots on television made that clean persona unavoidable. It was non-negotiable for the mainstream public.
And this context, it just makes the later shift to filthy comedy all the more shocking.
And his vocal connection to that wholesome narrative continued far into the 21st century. Even when his face wasn't visible, his voice carried the moral and emotional weight of another highly successful sitcom.
Right, he served as the consistent, authoritative voice of the future Ted Mosby.
The narrator of the CBS sitcom How I Met Your Mother.
For its entire run. 208 episodes from 2005 to 2014.
And that narrator role, speaking from the perspective of 2030, it positioned his voice as one of retrospective wisdom, humor, and ultimate maturity.
It's yet another massive, decade-long commitment to a mainstream narrative that required trust and a sense of decency from the audience.
So how did he manage the inevitable collision course between this extensive, lucrative success in family entertainment and the completely opposing professional identity he was simultaneously cultivating, the blue comedy persona?
Well, the biographical sources suggest that he was highly strategic about the timing and segregation of his work. Initially, he kept the two worlds relatively separate.
Though public awareness grew pretty rapidly.
It did, and the definition of blue comedy here is crucial. It's not just raunchy, it's comedy that operates through calculated shock, often using vulgarity or profanity specifically to exploit the cognitive dissonance established by his family-friendly image.
The sources frame this perfectly as the contrast between his squeaky clean family sitcom image and his self-aware, profane comedian persona.
Right. It wasn't some secret hobby. It was a parallel professional brand.
And the industry recognized the success of this dual identity. His 2014 album, That's What I'm Talking About, it received one of the highest possible accolades in the field.
A nomination for the Grammy Award for Best Comedy Album.
That Grammy nomination is extremely significant. It confirms that the professional comedy world viewed him as a major, relevant, contemporary comic, entirely independent of the network television roles that had made him famous.
It validated the Dirty Daddy as a serious comedic artist.
To understand the depth of the contrast, we have to look at the specific thematic differences in the stand-up compared to the Danny Tanner persona.
Right. And we have to avoid the crude examples. But the stand-up was characterized by a relentless pursuit of the boundary, often satirizing the very idea of wholesome family values.
The material was relentless, fast-paced.
And it targeted uncomfortable subjects. It provided the audience with the wicked pleasure of hearing the world's most decent dad say the absolute worst things imaginable.
And he used his television image as a punchline mechanism. He began to directly reference the dichotomy in his acting roles, transforming the paradox into meta-humor.
A key example came in 1998 with an uncredited cameo in the stoner comedy Half-Baked,
where he played a cocaine addict, a direct subversion of the clean-cut host image.
He then took that self-parody to its maximum comedic potential in the HBO series Entourage. From 2005 to 2010, he had a recurring role playing an exaggerated, darker version of himself.
He was essentially telling the audience, you know that nice guy you see on ABC, here's the dark, selfish celebrity behind the curtain.
It exploited the public's awareness of his dual nature for sustained, complex comedic effect.
And this blending of the two identities also led to a strange form of musical branding. The 2005 song Rollin' with Saget,
by Jamie Kennedy and Stuart Stone.
It became practically synonymous with his stand-up tours.
The song directly detailed behaviors and attitudes far removed from the Tanner household, and the fact that Saget embraced it, using it on his tours and his website, it showed his commitment to owning the filthy brand.
He wasn't hiding from the contrast, he was performing it, actively using the clean image to enhance the shock value of the profane.
And the crowning statement of this strategic duality was the 2014 publication of his book, titled Dirty Daddy, The Chronicles of a Family Man Turned Filthy Comedian.
The title itself is the thesis.
It's a masterful piece of professional branding. By titling the book this way, he acknowledged and monetized the very conflict that defined his career. He provided the audience with a narrative key. The man you know is both, and this book explains how.
Beyond his acting and stand-up, we also must circle back to his Temple University roots, to his award-winning documentary short. Saget was consistently active behind the camera as a director.
Yes, reinforcing that serious artistic impulse. And his directorial work also plays into the duality, though often leaning toward the darker, more satirical end of the spectrum. In 1998, he directed his first feature film, Dirty Work.
Starring Norm Macdonald and Artie Lange.
Right. And Dirty Work initially received negative reviews from critics, and it performed poorly at the box office.
Which might suggest a directorial misstep.
Right.
However, its story is a fascinating study in cultural longevity versus immediate financial success.
Precisely. Despite the initial failure, the film eventually attained cult classic status. It became beloved by a segment of the comedy fan base.
And this late-stage popularity was fueled in part by frequent discussion on The Howard Stern Show.
Yes. Which illustrates how long-term cultural relevance, especially in comedy, can be driven by a highly engaged niche audience rather than immediate mainstream success.
His satirical filmmaking continued with Farce of the Penguins in 2007, a direct-to-DVD parody of March of the Penguins.
He was deeply involved in that project. He wrote, directed, and even voiced the character Carl. And that project relied entirely on postmodern irony, taking a serious nature documentary and subverting it with adult, absurd humor.
A perfect metaphor for his entire career.
The implication for the learner here is that this complex strategic cultivation of two opposite images, the moral center of Full House and the envelope-pushing stand-up, demonstrates a very sophisticated understanding of the entertainment business.
He didn't just stumble into these roles.
No, he actively utilized the clean persona as the ideal foil for the provocative one. He maximized shock and appeal on both sides simultaneously.
It required tremendous professional discipline to maintain both identities without one contaminating the other, especially in the pre-social media era. It speaks to his deep professional commitment. That comedic intensity, however, was often fueled by the extreme seriousness he maintained in his private life. And that leads us directly to his profound commitment to philanthropy.
Looking at his family life provides necessary context. He married Sherry Kramer in 1982.
And they had 3 daughters, Aubrey, Laura Melanie, and Jennifer Bell, before divorcing in 1997.
He later married television presenter Kelly Rizzo in 2018, and they remained married until his death.
But the thread connecting Saget's private seriousness to his professional drive is his deep and long-standing connection to the rare autoimmune disease, scleroderma.
This serious personal tragedy provided the core purpose for much of his philanthropic focus outside his demanding comedic career.
The sources indicate that his dedication was rooted in the loss of his sister, Gay Saget. She was diagnosed with scleroderma at age 43.
And she passed away tragically just 3 years later at 47. We have to note that the sources emphasize the difficulty in obtaining a diagnosis. She had been misdiagnosed numerous times.
But before the scleroderma was correctly identified.
Scleroderma is a chronic disease characterized by the hardening and tightening of the skin and connective tissues.
But it can also seriously affect internal organs.
Yes. The tragedy of misdiagnosis meant that precious time was lost in finding appropriate care. It amplified the pain and the severity of the family's experience. This kind of serious personal encounter with medical failure and loss deeply shaped Saget's advocacy.
And his response to this tragedy was immediate and professional. He didn't just fundraise, he integrated his filmmaking passion with his personal advocacy.
By directing the 1996 ABC television film For Hope,
which was directly inspired by his sister's life story. He used his creative platform to raise public awareness about the disease.
And his commitment wasn't fleeting. Saget served formally as a board member of the Scleroderma Research Foundation, or SRF, since 2003.
That role implies significant structural dedication, attending meetings, lobbying, consistently raising funds and awareness for nearly 2 decades.
This was far beyond a standard celebrity endorsement.
This long-term commitment raises an interesting analytical point. How do we reconcile the man who spent years quietly advocating for a serious, often fatal disease with the man on stage whose goal was to push the absolute limits of acceptable language and humor?
Well, it suggests that his stand-up might have served as a necessary release valve. When you're faced with the unrelenting seriousness of a fatal disease that claimed a family member and the deep, persistent commitment required for medical research, comedy, even abrasive, challenging comedy, it provides a vital counterpoint.
Laughter, pushed to the extreme.
It may have been his method of finding control and contrast against an uncontrollable, serious reality.
We also note another serious personal dedication in his body of work, His 2007 HBO comedy special, that ain't right.
It was specifically dedicated to his father, Den Saget. His father had passed away earlier in 2007 at age 89 from complications related to congestive heart failure.
So that creates a pattern. Two significant comedy projects, one film and one stand-up special, were directly tethered to the serious losses within his immediate family.
The intensity and boundary-pushing nature of his comedy were consistently contextualized by the raw pain and seriousness he experienced privately.
Therefore, his comedic output can be viewed not just as strategic branding, but potentially as a complex psychological reaction to profound personal loss.
The intense desire to make people laugh, even in shocking ways, was fundamentally connected to his deep commitment to serious advocacy. He was a professional humorist because he knew, perhaps better than many, the necessity of laughter in the face of profound gravity.
We now move to the factual circumstances surrounding his sudden passing, maintaining a tone of clarity and respect for the medical details provided in the sources.
On January 9, 2022, Robert Saget was found deceased in his room at a Ritz-Carlton hotel in Orange County, Florida.
He was discovered at approximately 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And the circumstances really emphasized the suddenness of the loss. He was actively working, engaged in a vibrant stand-up comedy tour.
He had performed just the night before in Ponte Vedra Beach. This confirms he was professionally active and in transit when the tragic accident occurred.
His connection to the comedic community was also evident right up until the end through his conversational work. His podcast, Bob Saget's Here For You.
It featured long-form conversations with peers.
And its 130th and final episode was released posthumously on January 31st, 2022. That episode featured a conversation with fellow comedian Dane Cook.
The official investigation concluded with an autopsy report released on February 9, 2022. It's critical to convey these medical facts clearly.
The primary cause of death was determined to be blunt head trauma.
This trauma resulted from an accidental blow to the back of his head. Investigators concluded it was most likely incurred from an unobserved fall.
And that fall resulted in severe internal injuries that ultimately led to his death in his sleep. Specifically, the autopsy noted a subdural hematoma and a subarachnoid hemorrhage.
To contextualize those injuries for you, a subdural hematoma is a collection of blood between the outer protective layer of the brain and the brain itself.
And a subarachnoid hemorrhage is bleeding into the space between the brain and the tissues that cover it. Both are extremely serious forms of internal bleeding within the skull. The severity and finality of these specific injuries underscore the accidental nature and tragic suddenness of his passing.
The autopsy also included the detail that he was infected with COVID-19 at the time.
However, the source material explicitly stresses that there were no signs suggesting the COVID-19 infection played any contributing factor in the cause of his death.
The death was attributed solely to the head trauma.
Following the news, his funeral took place just a few days later, on January 14. He was laid to rest at Mount Sinai Memorial Park.
The sources note that he was buried near the graves of his parents and his sister, Gay,
reinforcing the profound personal connection he maintained with his family throughout his life.
Following the initial public reports, his family took legal action to ensure privacy regarding the investigative details. On February 15, Saget's family filed a lawsuit.
They were seeking to prevent county officials from releasing additional investigation documents.
This legal maneuver cited privacy concerns, specifically related to the graphic nature of the content and the full investigative file.
A permanent injunction was subsequently issued on March 14, 2022, legally protecting those documents from public release. This reflects the family's understandable desire to maintain control over the narrative and protect his image from invasive details.
The immediate public reaction demonstrated his lasting cultural imprint, particularly his network television identity.
Yes, news of his death actually broke during a live Sunday night broadcast of America's Funniest Home Videos,
the show he originally hosted.
ABC, recognizing the gravity of the announcement and his connection to the program, interrupted the broadcast to announce his death.
Furthermore, the show's official YouTube channel immediately posted a dedicated tribute video, and the subsequent episode featured an on-screen dedication.
It was a clear testament to his status as a permanent fixture in the history of family programming.
But the most immediate and impactful legacy was seen in his dedicated philanthropic cause, the Scleroderma Research Foundation,
where he served on the board for almost 2 decades.
They saw an exponential surge in support that directly manifested his life's work.
The foundation's executive director confirmed, just days after his passing, that they received donations from over 1,500 donors worldwide.
totaling more than $90,000 in the immediate wake of the news.
It shows the immediate translation of public grief into purposeful action.
And even more significantly, a massive financial commitment was made by one of the SRF board members, a $1.5 million matching grant.
That mechanism was specifically designed to match every donation made in Saget's memory, providing a substantial, lasting injection of funds for the research he championed for so long.
The tragedy amplified the purpose.
Finally, the comedy community provided its own tribute that acknowledged his duality. A special was filmed at the Comedy Store by his longtime friend, Mike Binder.
Titled Dirty Daddy, the Bob Saget tribute, it incorporated footage from a private memorial.
And it was released globally on Netflix in June 2022, ensuring that the legacy of both the family man and the filthy comedian was honored side by side.
To synthesize the vast amount of information we've covered, Robert Saget's career was ultimately defined not by accident, but by the successful strategic navigation of two professional identities that were incompatible on paper.
He carefully crafted the enduring image of the caring, pristine television dad, Danny Tanner, while leveraging his artistic impulse and personal experiences
Especially his early film work and his later losses.
to become an outrageous, raw voice in stand-up comedy.
And the core thread that provided the anchor for these extremes was the seriousness he maintained privately. It was rooted in his initial ambition to be a doctor.
Evidenced by his award-winning documentary work and solidified by his deep, structural, long-standing commitment to scleroderma research following the profound personal loss of his sister.
That commitment, galvanized by family tragedy, was dramatically elevated and funded after his death.
It's astonishing how meticulously he segmented his brand, managing to avoid career contamination while still using the friction between the two roles to generate maximum comedic effect.
He mastered the art of exploiting the audience's knowledge of his wholesomeness for the sake of boundary-pushing humor.
This complex profile prompts a final reflection for you, the listener. The case of Robert Saget offers a powerful perspective on the gap between carefully managed public perception and profound private commitment. We consume the carefully curated image presented on screen, the wholesome host, but the factual biography reveals a deeply complicated, driven individual
Whose pursuit of humor, often pushed to extreme limits, was perhaps tethered directly to the relentless seriousness and philanthropic purpose he maintained outside the spotlight.
It raises the essential question of how fully we can ever truly know the public figures we consume, and how often a dedication to profound purpose, rooted in personal tragedy, may be the unseen fuel for even the most outrageous professional drive.
Thank you for allowing us to guide you through these sources today and exploring this complex professional life.
It was a privilege to explore this strategic duality and lasting legacy with you.
Thanks for listening.